If you had to say now, when you look at that 18-year-old that is under your charge, and you've got all these experiences from around the world, would you change anything that you did before versus now when you're
These questions where they say, what would you change, are always interesting because there's a process.
You mean I'm not original? No.
Yeah, that's a common that's a common question in interviews where they say, what would you have done different? And it's always a test because it's not a do-over. You know, you could always say, well, if I had a chance, I would have taken that player out a little earlier and put this guy in. And, but
never go back.
But the process of being open, being honest, and trying to find a real way and an honest way to connect with that young player and help him see himself in a better way and help him see what he needs to do every day a little bit better to get up the ladder, what he needs to do every day to be a better teammate. So I've made a zillion mistakes, but my mistakes are always made trying to find the right way to connect with a player and trying to find the right way to help that player and ultimately help our team.
On the table, Dr. JPT, bring the hard truth, set it free. On the table.
So, Bob, thank you. Appreciate you coming down. This is awesome. Pretty much, as you know, and we spoke about beforehand, the concept is my background as a physical therapist, athletic trainer, not just talking about prevention and performance. It's also about rehab. And with the World Cup coming up, we thought it would be a great opportunity for you to kind of join us today. We're very excited, but most people, you know, think that you bring in guests that you just meet or you call somebody. You and I've got a relationship that spans for years. Part of the relationship you didn't even know. I met you one day with Dick Malacrea in the Princeton athletic training room. We were doing an Ivy League course, and you came in, and Dick was so proud to introduce you to everybody. And you gave us a wave, a Bob wave, I call it. And it was great. And we had just broke, and I went over and introduced myself to you. And literally within 6 months, I think you were gone and off to coach somewhere else. So you went Princeton to where?
DC United and Olympic team.
Right.
But
okay.
Anybody who knows or who knew Dick Malacrea, then that means you're in good standing because Dick was one of the best. He, of course, was a real mentor for Russ Steves, who was the trainer that I had at Princeton for many years and still rely on in a lot of different ways. So, yeah, Dick was a special guy.
Well, to make you feel even more proud, JAG Physical Therapy is a sponsor of Princeton Athletics. So move that aside.
Yep.
We are also a supporter of the Dick Malacrea Scholarship that the Athletic Training Society of New Jersey does every year. And we've been doing that since I opened up JAG Physical Therapy because Dick and Jim Gossett, who was my head athletic trainer at Columbia, could not have been more mold shaping of me as a professional. Every time there was a meeting, Dick Malacrea made sure he introduced me to different people. And of course, Jim was my head athletic trainer for 1995 until 2000 at Columbia Athletics, which then I jumped into the NBA for a short stint with the New York Knicks, but then as a part-time assistant athletic trainer, working summer league and different events. And you moved on and made some great jumps. And we then met in a Chicago Fire Metro Stars battle where I was an assistant athletic trainer, physical therapist. You were the head coach of the Chicago Fire, who, and I could say it, beat down the Metro Stars. And some people got a little tense at the end of the game and rushed the field. And you, to be honest, had your composure, was making everybody calm down, and we had a little exuberant coach start running across, and my wrestling skills came out. I stepped in front of him, and you gave me a compliment and didn't know me. You said, At least there's someone smart over there. So thank you for that.
All right.
A couple of years later, you become our head coach at the Metro Stars. So let's start there.
All right.
So you come in as the head coach of the Metro Stars, and one of the biggest things that I saw you do is create, develop. Tell me a little bit as a coach. First of all, you were a player for years. You've coached in different places. You became a developer. When I look at athletes and I look at different people, you became someone that develops soccer players, football players, develops athletes. Tell me a little bit. You walk into the Metro Stars on the first day. What's the first thing you want to do?
You want to find the right way to connect with the players, to let them know that you're there to make them better, to get to know them. You don't arrive having all the answers, but there's a process to build a team, build a culture. And one of the most important ways for a team to get better is to make sure that players are getting better every day. And that's, of course, what happens on the field. But that also has a huge component of what happens off the field. How do they take care of themselves? What type of habits do they have when they show up every day? What are they doing before training? What are they doing after training? So for me, it was just trying to start to connect the dots for guys and let them know that there was going to be real work, but it was all about helping them.
Talk about the youth that you brought into that team. Think about the first 12 months. You came in and you brought a lot of young players. And you can name them, completely up to you.
Sure, I will.
You brought in a bunch of young players. Tell us a little bit about them and tell us the rationale of bringing in the youth.
Well, that was an interesting time in Major League Soccer because this was all before there were academies. But always trying to look around and understand what young players look like in your area, right? And so I had a pretty good feel for young talent in the country. We had a lot of really good young players in Chicago. One of the things that made Chicago successful was the balance between young guys that wanted to learn, wanted to get better, and experienced guys that were going to be good examples and were going to set the tone.
Develop and lead.
Yes.
Right?
And so when I got to Metro Stars, I was hopeful that we could do some of those things. And with my experience with what was going on the youth scene, I knew Mike McGee really well because he grew up around Chicago. He played in the same club team, club system that Michael and my daughters played in. That was the Soccers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew Mike since he's about 14. And Mike always had a knack for knowing how to score goals. And so I really felt that he had interesting qualities as a young player. I knew Eddie Gavin really well. I had gotten to see Ricardo Clark. And then eventually, obviously, I knew Michael pretty well and Timmy Ward. So the ability to bring some young players in, and we did a pretty good job also of trying to look outside the U.S. for some young players. I don't know, you remember Abi Ibrahim?
Yeah,
So
sure.
It was a striker from Togo, and he caught our eye. So the feeling was that if we can bring some of the right young players in and push them forward in a good way, and it's interesting because all these years later, when I have the privilege to watch Michael with this Red Bulls team, and we see the way Adri Mehmeti and Julian Hall and Matty DeSantos are playing, I think the idea that when young talent, when it's time, you push them, and when they're ready, you get them on the field, and I think that's what we were trying to do at that time.
Well, to watch Michael developed this team at Red Bull and to see what you did when it was the Metro Stars, very similar in the concept of development. But it sort of goes back to, and it's pretty interesting, you come out of an unbelievable pedigree of education, but I've always seen you as a teacher. I remember being in the locker room and you speaking to the players. It wasn't just about soccer skills. It was about how to take care of yourself. You focused a lot on that. You brought in a performance coach that focused on that. You changed our nutrition on the road, which was amazing because I was gaining weight on the road. You definitively became a teacher of not just soccer, but developing young professionals. And a lot of people don't look at it that way. I always saw it that way, and I actually thought it was great. But one of the things that I loved was that all of these names you just named have succeeded from a foundation that you gave them. That foundation of being a professional, and you look at the league of Major League Soccer, it was something that was not being done. What was the rationale that you felt it important to not only try to get wins? I mean, every coach is judged on the wins, but why did you feel it important to teach and develop young professionals?
When I looked around the world and I saw the best clubs, I always thought that there was a connection between the way the first team played, and then the second team, and then the academy. And as I said earlier, even when there was no actual academy, the ability to get young players at the right time, when you could still help them see the things that were important. And again, let me go back to Chicago, because the number of young guys, DeMarcus Beasley, Carlos Bocanegra, they were a little older because of the way the league was, but Chris Armas and C.J. Brown and Ante Razov and Jesse Marsh and Jim Curtin and so many
All
of
names
these
that
guys,
have succeeded.
guys that did well. And whenever I see those guys, there's still an appreciation that when they got to Chicago, they saw that the way things were being done. They really enjoyed the way training was pushed every day, the competitive side of it. And look, you have to give credit to experienced guys. So in the first years, Peter Novak, Lubos Kubik, then Christos Stoichkov. I'll never forget Christos Stoichkov in a warm-up one day. We're just doing some basic movements, and he looks to his left and he sees Bocanegra's not doing it the right way, and he takes the back of his hand and he smacks him across the chest, and he goes, "Hey,
Do it this
and he says, now." And so you as a coach, you don't plan stuff like that. It's not like you sit down with your experienced guys before training and say, here's what I want you to do. But when you get the right guys, then they help set the standards, and then they become the leadership group that establishes standards. So you work with them every day. And for me, I've always loved trying to make that an important part. And I've been lucky. I've worked with a lot of young players that have gone on and done well. And believe me, I don't take any credit, but I love the fact that some part of the experiences that we shared pushed them in a good direction. And that part, I still, when I see clubs around the world or clubs in the US that understand this pathway, understand how young players need to be challenged and pushed, I'm always very respectful because I think it's so important.
How does it make you feel that Jesse Marsh, Michael Bradley, your son, Chris Armas, and I'm sure there's a couple I'm forgetting, all are doing the same thing that you taught them? They're developing players, they're coaching players, they're educating players. They basically have followed in your footsteps. Maybe not all on the same pathway, maybe they have different styles, but these are people that you developed as, I'll say it, children. And ultimately now they're in different seated positions to develop players. That's got to make you feel amazing.
It does, but I think that the most important thing is just that you made sure that they were in a good environment where they could learn, where they could grow. And then they appreciated that. And then when the time came, some aspects were part of the way they went about things. And everybody has to do it their own way. One of the things that I've tried always to get across to young coaches is you've got to develop your own style. Your personality has to come out. I've been in different countries where I joke sometimes that there's like a manual for how to coach. And I always tell young coaches that when it's time to go on the field, leave that manual inside, put it on the shelf. And when you go on the field, don't coach out of a manual. Coach what you see. Coach moments in the game that are important. Coach players. Don't coach exercises. I never like it when I see a young coach where everything is, well, no, you can't go into that zone until we make 3 passes in this zone. And like more about things that actually aren't helping the player and less about, can you look around more? Where are the spaces?
Create.
That kind of thing. So look, I'm excited that so many of these guys took the experiences that they had and others that they had in their careers as players, working with different people. And then you see them in different situations and how they handle players and how their teams play. That part I appreciate. I love watching all these guys when they go to work.
So let's talk about MLS growth for when you first jumped in at DC United. Then you went to Chicago. Then you went to the Metro Stars. DC United was sort of lucky, right? So the DC United opens up technically in the old Redskins or Commanders' old facilities. So there was a structure, right? There was a locker room. There was sort of a structure to house a professional team. I have no idea what you walked into in Chicago, but I definitely know what you walked into the Metro Stars.
Yeah, well, let's take Chicago for a second.
Yeah.
Because you're right on target that at DC United, the old Redskin Park, and before Bruce and I got there, the mind behind everything at DC United was Kevin Payne. And Kevin understood that in order to do things the right way, there had to be the right environment where when players showed up every day, it felt professional. So there we were, Redskin Park. It was obviously the Redskins had moved out to a bigger, nicer facility, but for us in those first 2 years,
For the league, I mean,
it was
it
incredible.
was premier.
It was ahead of its time.
Right.
So now I get to Chicago at the end of '97. And Peter Wilt is the general manager. And at that time, there's no decision about where the team will train. And Dennis Hamlet, Dennis is still a great friend. Dennis was doing community relations for Peter. He had finished his career and was trying to figure out what would come next.
What was next?
Yeah. And so Dennis and I started driving around, looking at different spots. And we went up to Lake Forest, and we saw the old Bears facility. And of course, I'm like, ding, 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 this is the one. And at first, Peter Wilt was not on board. He felt like it's too far. And we were able to convince Peter that the main office was going to be downtown. He was going to run that. When he needed to come to Lake Forest, he was always welcome. But that was going to give us the chance to be professional.
And a home.
And a home. And it worked out in all the same ways as DC United. So we were really lucky. Hallis Hall, obviously, after George Hallis. And there we were, right on the one corner of Lake Forest College. But there's some great stories from the work that went on inside Hallis Hall every day. It was old school, John. There was no special room for video. Video was done right in the locker room. And the TV was there, and obviously when I was putting together edits to show players, I was sitting right there in the locker room. So we were all in it together, and in today's world, things get done in a much different way. But it was still really effective.
But by far, you went from DC United to Chicago, and you had to create this professional environment. And then you come to the Metro Stars.
And then it was hard.
We're on the move every hour.
Well, I started for a few months at Keene College.
We were at Keene.
Yeah, the old Pingree.
Yeah, we got thrown out in 24 hours or less.
Yeah, I got thrown out.
Yeah.
And so
our contract was broken.
Yeah.
We'll say it politically correct. And all of a sudden we're on the move. We're going to the stadium now. And then we're going to parks.
Yeah, it was a challenge.
You thought I forgot that.
No, there was going outside. There was training in Newark. There was training in Rutherford.
Yeah.
At one point, there was the
field in the back.
In the back that then got taken away literally in 24 hours
Yeah.
as well. But nonetheless, we tried to make sure that when the players showed up every day, that it was professional. The biggest challenge was when concerts rolled in, John.
Right.
Because the number of people that would show up that were contracted to put the stage up
together.
and get everything ready, and there we were trying to figure out how we were going to train every day. That wasn't always easy.
I remember when Bruce Springsteen's concert tour came into the stadium.
10 shows.
You 10 shows. You and I I think they gave us 20 yards in the back. And I don't know, we were walking out together and you turn around and go, going to be interesting preparing the next 10 days for any games, but we'll figure it out. And you had these small-sided games just to keep the guys engaged. But I don't think people realized the early years of the league.
Yeah.
And
But
where
there was one plus to all that for those 10 days.
Yeah.
That if you worked late
you got to listen. You got a
and
free,
you left,
you got a free
there
concert.
you were. You got 10 times to see Springsteen.
Free concert. Now the funny thing about it is I was fortunate enough that one of the bandmates had sprained their ankle and they asked me to treat him. I won't put name on camera, but one of the bandmates went down and I was able to treat one of the bandmates of the East Street Band.
Nice.
So my claim to fame
Good for you.
for a sprained ankle when he was walking up the stairs.
All right.
So let's transition a little bit, right? So we look at the league and we look at what you said earlier today, which was you were looking at teams that had development academies. And now all of a sudden, U.S. soccer sort of gave up, so to speak, and I don't want to put anybody down, but has handed the reins of youth soccer to Major League Soccer. And now we have MLS, MLS Next Pro, MLS Next. Is this sort of the vision that you saw things happening, that we truly had academies to feed the clubs, to develop the player? That's sort of your vision?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
When it's done well, then it's what you would have envisioned. But just because you have an academy, there are still challenges. And so the ability to connect whatever the ideas about how the first team plays, and whatever profiles and players that you think are important, and to connect that with academy and make sure that the right kids are in the academy, they're getting the right training sessions. And then I think that a lot of academies in MLS have done a good job. And there are many, many players that you see that have moved through academies. Some doing really well in MLS, some have moved outside the MLS into Europe.
And we're developing more players than we've ever developed before.
I think that you give credit, but I have high standards, and I still know that there's days where I see academy teams in training or academy teams playing, and I still feel like it should be better. So the work never stops. But nonetheless, a lot of things have moved in a good direction, and now it's important that the work continues and the work gets better. And so when we see young players that come through academy, you can tell when they start to come into first team training, and you can tell when their chance comes to play how good everything was
At
in
the
their earlier days.
Because it's a system. It's a process.
There's a lot to it. It's
right.
Once again, it's not out of the book, but there's a real understanding that some people have, that some clubs have, of making sure that players are moved along in the right way.
For the parents out there, if you had a look at an age that you think a developing player should be in a system, what would that age be?
That depends on every kid.
Okay.
And so
The maturity level?
yes.
No.
I don't think that there's a
One age.
one answer. In fact, I think that parents need to really try to look at their kids and be open to giving it the right amount of time and letting it go the way it should. Some kids are more committed, more serious. Maybe their jump into an academy team comes earlier. There are other kids that are still playing more than one sport. And
Philosophically, what's your opinion of multi-sport athletes?
I think it depends on the kid.
Okay.
So I know that there's all sorts.
Me as a healthcare guy,
Yes.
want people in multi-directional training or different sports just for the aspect of growing and strengthening the body.
There's no doubt that
Right.
that for young athletes, the idea that the way they move, their coordination, that they're being challenged in all these different ways. Now, we also need to be honest that there are countries in the world where the kids don't have options to play all sorts of sports.
Right.
And those kids,
Football and soccer is it. Right.
that's it.
Right.
And it's not hindering those kids.
Right.
So I don't agree when people say it's got to be one or it's got to be the other. Once again,
Right.
it comes down to opportunities, and it comes down to families. It comes down to, if you're lucky, maybe it doesn't happen in every place these days, but you still live in a neighborhood where there's kids. And
Right.
kids are outside, and kids are playing and doing different things. Now,
Which is tough to find.
which
these
is
days.
tough to find. And now, if that's not the case, yes, what does that mean? That leads us more towards the development that comes from more structured situations. But it's a good challenge even for clubs. It's a good challenge for U.S. soccer because the creation of places, safe places, where kids can go and play. And it is not hardcore structured coaching. Right. And it's almost like the people in charge, they're versions of playground directors.
Right.
They make sure that there's no trouble.
No.
They make sure
Safety.
that it's safe.
Balls out there, equipment.
Exactly. And yet kids can be kids.
Right.
And so I view this through many different lenses. And
Well, as a parent, I'm sure you look at
Sure.
it one way.
I have seen all the experiences that my children have, and now my grandchildren are having. And so I think that when we look at development of soccer in the U.S., the understanding that there are many different situations, and how are we providing opportunities for all kinds of kids?
Right.
And
Everybody deserves it.
yes, everybody deserves opportunity, and then the responsibility is that we are identifying kids that have talent, and then making sure that those kids are encouraged and helped and moved along. And that comes in many different ways. In the old days, there were a lot of simple clubs, and there were many parents that participated helping some of the kids whose parents were working. Maybe couldn't get the training, or maybe couldn't always afford some of the trips.
Yeah.
And those parents and those families made sure that those other kids still could be included. That was done in a very low-key, Manfred Schellscheidt,
Yeah.
Union Lancer style, right? And there are many, many other good examples of that.
Yeah.
So you know that that's one way to do it. Now there are many clubs that have greater means. There's this constant discussion about pay for play, and
It's already in D.C. in conversations, and
sure,
state level in conversations.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But at the basic level, John,
Yeah.
man, kids need opportunities, and that's boys, that's girls, that's
And
kids
to
from different
engage, it's got to be
backgrounds.
fun. To
Yes.
engage, it's got to be fun.
Absolutely.
You can't do it unless it's fun. I mean, listen, as you know, I was a wrestler.
Yep.
And I don't know if you would call wrestling fun, but there wasn't a day I went to practice I didn't have fun.
It's awesome.
It was a blast. And I come out of a program that the first 2 years of wrestling, there were cuts. So we had 18 kids on the team. There were 30 that went out. Then we had a coach that come in and said, what are we cutting people? We got to develop wrestlers.
Right.
And now we've become one of the strongest wrestling programs in the Northeast at Monsignor Farrell High School, where we have 75 kids on the team every year and are winning championships and kids getting scholarships. So the theory is the same.
It's amazing that regardless of sport, if there's a person in an area that cares, that takes initiative. Another example in New Jersey right now is down in Trenton, Mooch Soccer. And so Charlie Inverso, friend of mine, some of the other Mercer County soccer guys, started a program for inner city Trenton kids. And Mooch is Glenn Meyernick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about making sure that some of these kids from
have the opportunity.
Have opportunities.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these stories don't get told. And when we look around the country, if you're fortunate and you know in different areas who made a difference, and every now and then when those people get a little bit of recognition, a little bit of credit, I think that helps. I think that we can never forget all the people along the way that not for money, just because they loved the game and they loved kids, went out of their way to do it right. So I always have great appreciation for that.
Well, you mentioned Manny.
Yeah.
And look at the history, but more importantly, look at the legacy of what he's built in America. I mean, people know him from New Jersey. They know him at Seton Hall. They know him in Union County. But think about the people that have gone through his camps, his clubs, his teams. I mean, expand a little bit about that.
Manfred Schellscheidt's one of a kind.
Right.
And I think anybody who's ever had a chance to spend any time around them benefits. One of his gifts is his ability to take note and observe everything that's going on around him. And even though English isn't his first language, he has special ways to put his observations into words. And so he has made a difference for so many different kids. I always say that some of the guys that played for me, Tommy McCabe, Kirk Riddell, Patrick White, help from Jimmy Barlow and others, they put together this little documentary called The Voice of the Game. And it's about Manfred.
That's awesome.
And it's a great title because whenever you were around Manfred, you felt like he was the voice of the game. That he wasn't saying things in fancy ways. He was saying things that connected really simply with what happened when you were on the field. And so his legacy, and he is now 85 years old, and he is still working with the youngest kids in Red Bull Academy. And the joy that he brings to every training session and his ability to make discussions with the rest of the academy coaches better, it's one of a kind.
Well, it's amazing that when you look at development, and as you know, I went into soccer medicine sort of oddly. I went and did a favor for a day and haven't left since 1999. But ultimately, there's nowhere in New York or New Jersey that when you meet people that are in the game that don't have something to say about Manfred.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable the loyalty and respect of what he's created. And what was amazing is I just went a couple of weeks ago to Jason Hernandez's induction to the Seton Hall of Fame. And there's Manfred holding court, and all of his players for over 30 years were all sitting around a table just waiting for a pearl of wisdom just to be dropped. So I think that's amazing. And me being a guy that's been around athletics my whole career, I think it's awesome. And you know, I've worked for some awesome coaches similar to you from different leagues between the NHL and different things. And it's amazing to see the respect he gets. Let's talk about coaching a little bit and just jump a little bit. This is our World Cup series for the On the Table at Dr. Jag PT. You had the privilege and honor to coach a World Cup team. Share a little bit about that.
Amazing honor. And the feeling of going into a World Cup, responsibility, knowing that there are so many people in the country that would give anything to be connected, be part of a national team. We're going to watch the games. We're going to live and die with every play. So that feeling, and then you work to make sure that the group you put together, the standards that are set, the habits, everything is in place so that when that World Cup starts, everybody's at their best. And I think that those of us that were involved in the work that led to going to South Africa in 2010, and it's important always to say that you end up at that time with a team of 23 players and a staff, but the process includes many other people. And it's always difficult because there are people that contributed along the way that don't make the final roster. So when you take a second when that national anthem is being played, you're thinking about a lot of different people, not just the ones that you have in the group that day, but all the ones that made a difference to get you there.
To get you.
And then the games start, and the ability as a group to compete. We had a special group. That World Cup in 2010, we were challenged because we had to play from behind. We had some calls that went against us. But the way everyone responded, and of course, it culminated in winning the group when Landon scores the late goal against Algeria. And it's a moment that is going to be always important in U.S. soccer history. And the feeling of all of us on the field after the game, we won the group, and the culmination of a lot of real days, a lot of discussions. As a coach, you're always looking to challenge players in the right way. But when you get closer and closer to the event, the challenging part is over. It's already been done. And then it's a matter of making sure everybody appreciates each other and is there for the right reasons. And we really had that.
Well, that's a special World Cup for me because I knew you.
Yep.
And then for the athletes on the team, I had the privilege of taking care of it at their club that was here. And what was really nice is Tim Howard actually gave me that jersey when he came back. So that's your 2010 World Cup jersey that Tim Howard was nice enough to
with the sash
to give me.
Yes.
So I'm privileged that Tim thought that I should have that.
Tim was not number 9, however.
Yes, he was not.
He likes to think he was a striker, but he was
right. But between I guess it was Edson Buttle, Tim Howard, Michael, and Josie. Those were the guys that I knew, and then of course working for you when I was the athletic trainer. So that was a privilege that Tim would even think of me and do that, but very proud to watch you guys get to the round of 16 and prayed that but it was awesome. After that, you've had unbelievable opportunities. Talk a little bit about the opportunities, and then we're going to come back to the World Cup, but talk about some of the opportunities that you think as a coach, a developer, really sit in your heart that really think helped you as a coach develop personally.
One of the things that I believe in is that you try to challenge people, and then to do it, you challenge yourself of what it means to take risks, to go outside your comfort zone. And when I finished with the U.S. team, then the opportunity came to go to Egypt and to become the national team coach in Egypt. And it was shortly after Arab Spring. And obviously, there's a lot to the decision. Luckily, my wife has always been there and been supportive. Kids were older, so it wasn't a matter of moving a whole family. That would have been probably impossible.
Yeah.
And then when we got to Egypt, there was a terrible day in a stadium where young fans that had gone to the stadium at the end of the game, was a setup where Lights went out, gates were locked. There were people inside that stadium that were there to cause trouble. And 72 young fans lost their lives in the stadium. And I was at another game, but we were getting reports about what was going on. And then, so the massacre in Port Said meant that the league got shut down. And the players weren't getting paid, and they didn't know what was going on in their careers. And we had a World Cup qualifier 4 or 5 months later. And we had to find ways that we could still get together and train, get games. We couldn't play games inside Egypt because the government decided that there was no football. And so what I saw was an amazing group of guys that came into every camp. They were so proud to be in that camp. They didn't know what was going on in their lives, but to be part of the national team for them was the ultimate.
No matter what obstacle.
No matter what obstacles. And the opportunity to work with those players. The senior captain was Albatreka. He was a number of times African Player of the Year. The young star was Mo Salah. But there were so many really good guys. And for me, that was an incredible experience to be outside the U.S. And try to find the right ways to lead a group. And I got asked after this terrible day so many times, why are you still here? And I would always say that you can't lead if you're the first one out the door. And so it was a challenge, but it was one that I learned so much from. And ultimately, we won all of the games in the first round of the qualifying, but because we hadn't had the chance to play official matches, now they have the day of the draw for the final round, and we're in pot 2, and we end up with Ghana, and the first game is a disaster.
Right.
And I stay for the second, and we win, but the number of goals isn't enough. And so the agreement was that if we didn't qualify, I was out. And it was bittersweet because of the experiences. I was proud that they then qualified for the next World Cup, and I still see, even as we prepare for this summer's World Cup, there are a number of the players from that time, starting with Salah, that are still around. So that was incredible. And then from there, I've been lucky. I've gone to different countries. I've experienced different cultures, and tried to go into each situation. And I said it at the beginning, not arrive with all the answers, but to get to know people, to try to understand how I could push them and lead them. And I'll always be appreciative for all of the different places along the way.
Amazing opportunities, amazing experiences. You bring it now back here.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to say now, when you look at that 18-year-old that is under your charge, and you've got all these experiences from around the world, would you change anything that you did before versus now when you're developing that player? Or would you say philosophically it's all together?
These questions where they say, what would you change, are always interesting because there's a process.
You mean I'm not original? No.
Yeah, that's a common that's a common question in interviews where they say, what would you have done different? And it's always a test because it's not a do-over. You know, you could always say, well, if I had a chance, I would have taken that player out a little earlier and put this guy in. And, but
never go backwards.
But the process of being open, being honest, and trying to find a real way and an honest way to connect with that young player and help him see himself in a better way and help him see what he needs to do every day a little bit better to get up the ladder, what he needs to do every day to be a better teammate. So I've made a zillion mistakes, but my mistakes are always made trying to find the right way to connect with a player and trying to find the right way to help that player and ultimately help our team.
Gel the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. So as you know, JAG Physical Therapy treats a tremendous amount of kids, and we have a lot of parents that watch our podcast. And ultimately, again, you're my hero when it comes to developing people.
All right.
And I don't know if you know that, but just watching, again, going back to early in the conversation where we talked about the youth that you've always tried to develop. What would you tell parents right now? Forget about the World Cup. You've got that 14-year-old that has passion, that wants to be on the field. You, as in my mind, the teacher of soccer, and what would you tell a parent right now? 3 great tips for their youth football or soccer player that's out there and has passion. What would be 3 tips you would give parents?
The number one tip is to make sure that you support their passion. That when you raise children, to try to help them find something that they love, something that they want to do. Ultimately, like, whether it works out exactly the way you want or not, that connection, that passion, that commitment to try to take something as far as you can, that's an incredible part of growing up. And you're going to be successful when you have those experiences, regardless of whether it's in soccer or not. And so for me, parents have to find the right way to support that. And that's not easy, because there are times that challenging your son or daughter is important. Can you be honest with them? But do it in a way that's also not putting the hammer down. The car rides home should not be something that the young athlete can't stand. The ride home should still be positive and encouraging, also real. I think sometimes you can say, when your team got behind today, you looked like and you gave up a little bit. Come on, I know you can do it. So you try to find good ways, but it's so important that it's not that the game ends and now the parents are so hard that the kid doesn't want to hear it. And I think the ability, maybe this is next, is just to know your son or daughter, to know, because everybody learns and picks up things at different speeds. So don't compare your son or daughter with everybody else, all right? Just try to help them with where they are at that time. And I think that, for me, is really, really important.
It's an awesome
right?
message.
And then the third one, as parent, is let them play. So when the game starts, don't be a voice. Don't be telling them while the game's going on exactly what to do. Let the game teach them. Let them make decisions. Trust coaches. Whether the coaches are the best or not the best, it's still important that in that moment, your son, your daughter have that experience with the game and with their teammates and with the coaches, and then you let them have that. You don't interfere every step of the way with that. So those are my 3.
I love those 3. Those are awesome. Great messages. So now we've got the World Cup. Tell me, everybody wants to talk about the players. Everybody wants to talk about the teams, who's going to finish where. I want to know more as a coach. You're in charge of everything going on. You've got physical therapists, athletic trainers, physicians, and listen, there's a component of sometimes based on travel schedules, you don't know who's going to be with you. I mean, you were very fortunate. You had a knit team for your World Cup, but I've seen groups that didn't. But right now, I mean, we're a couple of weeks before the World Cup. I mean, you've got a player that goes out that can't play. You've got to figure out who you're bringing in that maybe not have been in a rotation. Give us a glimpse of what that is as the skipper, as the person that's developing the 3 to 4 weeks before You go in, kid gets hurt, a player gets hurt at a club. Give us a little glimpse of that. Stress, that stress.
The key is that you have built a system with people that you trust and that you've had time to prepare everybody. Now, that's not always the case. For me, there was a cycle of 4 years leading into the World Cup in 2010. And as I said earlier, some changes were made with staff and players, but there was a real sense of how we did things. There was a real sense of communication with physios, with the doctors, and we understood in different moments when real difficult decisions needed to be made, how we were going to make those decisions. And I think that as you get close to a World Cup, your information that everybody gets from clubs is important. Because players arrive at the end of seasons, and in some cases those seasons have gone well. Not in every case. Some players arrive mentally fresh, excited, World Cup, can't wait. Some, if the season hasn't gone perfectly, mentally a little bit down, they'll, with time, recover. But your understanding of where each athlete is coming in, and again, how you put your work together at that point. Seems like every World Cup, the amount of time that you get right before the World Cup gets shorter. And this year it's short.
It's very short.
It's short. And the World Cup begins on, I believe, June 12th. And then there are players that are, in some cases, playing finals on like May 30th. Right. So you can only imagine that in certain places, you're getting guys really late. And you have to understand, where are they physically? Where are they mentally? And all of the work that you do as a national team coach is to establish routines and communication lines so that when players come in, there's no surprises. And everybody's comfortable with the way things get. That's the work. So it's a big list of guys that in the last period, not just in the U.S., but around the world, that have taken injuries. And
how big is a roster going to the World Cup?
The roster now has gone to 26.
26.
So that means that coaches in some cases have a little bit of a luxury that maybe a player that might not be ready for the first game
can get there.
Can get there. This is a discussion that I'm seeing right now with Lamine Yamal, because obviously young player, incredible, one of the most talented young players we've ever seen, really important for Spain, and now they're saying that it's possible that he would miss the first 2 games in the group. And then, of course, they have to decide, are we strong enough without him for those games? I think Spain feels they are. But those are all the type of factors that play into how you put your roster together. And you want to cover every situation. You want to make sure that no matter what happens in the World Cup, you've thought through plan B and plan C so that there's no surprise.
Constant strategy.
Yes.
Constant.
Yeah.
So now we're lucky, right? The final's going to be here in New Jersey. We've got teams coming in, staying in New York and New Jersey at different practice facilities. Some teams coming in 10 days before, some teams coming in 7, some teams coming in 2 weeks. When you bring the team into market now, is the expectation just to get them to gel in unison, or is the expectation really to tell them your seasoned professionals, figure it out? I mean, I would think it's more gel in unison to prepare for the games, but you don't see them all year. They're all at different clubs. They're all playing for different coaches, all playing different styles. And now you come into market, you're in New York and New Jersey. What is a coach doing in that 7 to 14 days before the game?
You've picked a training facility and a place to stay that's going to work. That's going to allow players time to relax. Even little things like what time do you train? Because you don't want days to just be slow and linger. You want players to feel like the day is moving. There's work. There's some things that, of course, you do off the field. There's some commitments that are part of it between media and commercial things. But you try to be ahead of the game with all of this and just make sure now that the players can come in and can enjoy being at the World Cup. Right. And so there's so many little details for us in South Africa in around the different draws for Confederations Cup and for the World Cup. Tom King, who's been at US Soccer for a long, long time, and I would always connect with the group at FIFA, Match, that helps each country figure out where you want to stay and where you're going to train. And we looked everywhere at every facility, where is the training, how far is it to get from where you're staying to the field, gym-wise, is the gym at the facility, do you use a different, there's all these details because all of those go into how you fit your day in. I mean,
and there's a social aspect.
Yes,
no?
I mean, one little thing for us in South Africa, we stayed in a place and the families were about 25 minutes away. And the families were in an area where they could go shopping, they could go restaurants, and then we found some ways where the families could come out or the players could go in, and the players were comfortable with that. And we found, we ended up getting on a training schedule in the afternoon. And that meant that in the morning, there was opportunities to go to an outside gym where you could go for half an hour, you could go for 45 minutes. You didn't need to go every day. Breakfast was up for a window of time so that players could figure out their own morning. And then every day it was lunch as a team. And then there was a little bit of preparation before we got on the bus, depending upon the route.
No.
Some days 20 minutes, some days 25 minutes, and then you train, and then you come back, and there's some recovery, and then there's dinner, and then there's a little work. And players then, there were some things set up where players had free space and things they could do. So if the players were all sitting here right now, they wouldn't think that every part of what we put together was perfect because, yeah, they didn't have everything they wanted. But from a coaching standpoint, I always look back that we figured out a good way, and our routines that had been built up over time were understood and appreciated, and it worked. And I know that there are 48 different teams right now that are going through all those details and making sure that they get everything right.
Listen, great insight. Let's talk about, you've been in a locker room your entire life. You've been in the locker room as a player, a coach. What's your best locker room story that you want to share with us? Could be funny, could be serious. The best locker room story that you can pick out of your head and want to share.
Oh, John, come on. There's so many.
We're still really young, so don't make it sound like it's
bad. No. Look, I talk about Chicago in different ways, and our captain was Peter Novak, and he had been captain of the Polish national team. And before we signed him, he was playing for 1860 Munich, and I traveled to Munich, and I spent 5 or 6 days, and we talked about the challenges, we talked about the expectations, and what I wanted him to be like as a leader and a captain. And as we got started, there were days when we won. Maybe we didn't play as well as I thought we needed to play. And I would then think to myself, if we don't do better with the way we attack in these moments, the next game it's not going to go well. And some part of that was on my mind when the game was over. And Peter would say to me, don't show that. Let us enjoy the moment. And then you can present some of those things tomorrow or the day after. And so I quickly called that the Novak rule. And so what does that mean? That means that when you speak after a game, and again, it's different. Do you win? Do you lose? What's the next game? How many days do you have? But I'll always remember that idea that when we've won, there's got to be a feeling that everybody can enjoy that. And as a coach, you're not handling things well if you take away the joy in that moment. So yeah, that's the Novak rule.
I like the Novak rule. That's
Yeah.
pretty good. I think every coach should follow the Novak.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's pretty good. So just going back to MLS for a minute. Now, we talked about Chicago. We talked about the Metro Stars and the undertaking of practice facilities. Right now, there's an amazing launch of how the players in Major League Soccer are being taken care of. I mean, you see the Red Bull new complex go up. I haven't gotten my tour yet from Michael, but I'll break his chops. But I understand it's amazing. You have the amazing facility being built at New York City FC. You saw what LAFC is built. I mean, these are things that players 15, 20 years ago didn't have, but everything is there between nutrition, between performance, conditioning, sports medicine, the best of the best. I mean, I remember we used to go on commercial flights and sit in the middle row, and now they're having the opportunity to fly privately. Do you think that improves the U.S. soccer player success in the World Cup, that people have that? Or do you think facilities mean nothing? It's all about the mentality. It's all about performance. And yeah, it's nice to go into a Rolls Royce to go play soccer, but
It's both, John.
All right.
It's both. It's both. Having good
you
facilities.
had no idea I was going that way.
No, but having good facilities is a privilege, and obviously, for players that go in every day, the quality of the gym, so the work that you do before training, the recovery facilities, those are important things to get right. But just because you have them, that doesn't mean that now you are ready. That doesn't mean that you're a top pro. There still are standards, and there are so many good examples. I think Argentina as a national team always gets, for me, I have so much respect that the players have never forgotten what it was like on the way up. And the Argentina national team, of course, does things at a high level, but they don't stay every time in the fanciest hotels. There's a sense of camaraderie, and there's a sense of this is the way it was when we were growing up, and this is what it's like in our country, and that comes through too. So it's gotta be balanced, and you want players to feel like they have everything they need to be successful, but you want players that also appreciate where they came from. And I at some point during the process with the U.S. team, when things were going well, so it wasn't like I picked the Novak rule, it wasn't like I picked a day when now I'm going to jump on everybody. But when things were going well, one time I said to the players that when you come into camp, it is awesome, the camaraderie, how you see guys that you knew when you were growing up, and now you come into camp and you're excited to see your friends and spend time with them. Carlos Bocanegra and Stevie Cherundolo, they roomed together every time. And they were longtime friends, and Carlos was captain, but Stevie's influence on Carlos in their friendship and in the time that they had together made Carlos a better captain. And then in a way that made Stevie just as much a leader as Carlos. Right? So I said to them, this camaraderie is awesome. But for us to get where we want to go, there has to be some way that you can also tell your friend something he doesn't want to hear. because you can't just always tell him things that he wants to hear. And so can we find the balance? And so that part of the standards and how you communicate, and yes, where you stay. If you stay in the worst place possible, then players will complain.
Yeah.
But I know that in the Confederations Cup in 2009, where we got to go to South Africa and experience everything a year before the World Cup, when we first arrived in Pretoria, we didn't stay in a great place. And guess what? Every time you looked around, the players were sitting together, they were playing cards, they were talking.
They figured it out.
Yes, and I think that that's an important part of it.
That helps build. So totally personal now. You've had some health issues.
Not issues.
Well, you've had some opportunity to benefit from having procedures on your knees, and you've been rehabbing at JAG Physical Therapy. Share a little bit about that.
I have managed my health over the years. I'm lucky. I've never missed a day on the field. Found in my routine a way to work out every day and have time to myself. I think it's really important. But at a certain point, you can feel that the knees are getting worse. And I showed up at your house one day. We talked about it. And the reason that it had come to a head is because I just knew that my gait was from one day to the next, not where it needed to be. And I always felt good coming out of the gym, but some days going in and some days leaning a little more one way and the other way. So off we went, and Dr. Maiman, HSS, consultation, and he said, yeah, your tires are worn out. So we got bilateral total knee replacements.
At the same time.
Yeah, that's bilateral, exactly.
And you didn't complain at all.
Time. And I appreciated that he did both, because I know in some cases, some doctors
won't do it.
Will do one and then 6 months later do the other. But you sent a few people over literally a day later. They got me started. I spent many, many days at your clinic in Chatham. Your people are awesome. So
thank you.
I watch them every day when people of different ages come in, and men and women, and just the way they treat everybody, know the names. And I got to know everybody's name. I not only the people that work there, but all the people that came in and their stories. My mom and dad were lucky. They're 94. And you had one woman who was coming in doing some work on her shoulder. And her husband years ago passed away, but he was in the Korean War, and my father was. And so there I am in your clinic one day talking to a woman in her 90s about Chosin Reservoir and the Korean War. And so you have great people, and they pushed me every day. And so I tried to make sure that I worked hard with all the support that I had, and I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm doing okay, John. Thanks.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for coming out and being on the table with Dr. Jag PT.
Good.
This was awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Good,
you.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you.